Hey guys, Harry here from the Art Gear Guide. As you can see, I've got another tutorial here for you. So this one is the grapes that I did for when I was reviewing the Phoenix colored pencils. Now, as always is the case, you don't need to have these Phoenix colored pencils to do this artwork. The purpose of these tutorials is for you to be able to select whatever pencils you have at your disposal and follow along with this particular tutorial. But I have managed to add in kind of like a little hint, so to speak, that sometimes I find helpful. Now, I've tried to draw grapes many times before, and none of them have ever turned out the way these grapes turned out for me. But before we get into all that, the paper that I'm using here is Derwent Lightfast paper, which is quite expensive paper. So if you... Another paper that I likened to the Derwent Lightfast paper is the Fabriano Artistico extra white hot press paper. I think those two papers are very, very similar. However, anything like a Bristol Vellum or something with a little bit of tooth, maybe even the Strathmore 500 series Bristol plate, or the Strathmore Mixed Media series, whether it's the 300, the 400 or the 500, papers like that will be fine for this tutorial. Now, one of the problems that I always found with doing grapes is whether you're doing black or red grapes, it seems to mainly be the black or the red grapes, and occasionally the green grapes, but there's kind of like this powdery look on the skin of the grapes. And obviously, whatever way the light is reflecting on it as well, that will affect how this powdery, it's almost like a lilac-y grey colour that sits on the surface of the skin of the grapes. And I've always found it really, really difficult to try and get that look. Now, for this tutorial, I've actually supplied for you, obviously, the reference image, and I've also supplied the outline of the grapes, so you can print it off and trace it and then put it onto whatever paper you're going to work with. But I've also supplied, for anybody that has like Photoshop or anything else like that, like software like Photoshop, I've supplied, like, what I'll do is sometimes, if, as was the case with these grapes, I really wanted to hone in and try and get the colours right, and to get this powdery grey lilac-y colour right as well. And so what I did was I took the reference image and I put it into Photoshop, and on areas of the grapes where I thought I might have a little bit of problem, I used the eyedropper tool, touched the colour, and what that does is whatever colour you're touching, it kind of like brings it up on the screen, and then you can use like a paintbrush or something like that. And as you can see from the image that I'm providing here for you, I've just like put the colours on beside the reference image, and those colours just helped me a little bit be able to select the pencils that I was looking for. Now, don't forget, I had a limited palette here because I was doing a review, so I had to work with what I had. But I think this can be a really good tip for anything else that you're doing. You take your reference image, put it into Photoshop or something like that, and if there's certain colours that you're not 100% sure on, just use the eyedropper tool, touch whatever colour it is, and it'll come up on the screen, and then use a brush and just scribble it onto the side of your reference image, just to give you a better visual representation of what that colour is and how it's going to transfer over to your pencils. So as you can see here with the drawing, so if you're looking at your reference image now, I am right-handed, so I am starting from left to right. I don't always stick to this, but it's a good idea if you're right-handed that you start far left and work your way across the paper. That way you're not dragging your hand across work. Or if you are left-handed, start from the right-hand side of the paper and work your way across to the left. But as you can see here, I've started off with kind of like the furthest most grape, and looking at your reference image, you'll see that there's a very prominent shadow from the grape above it. So I just started off really putting that in. Didn't really mess about too much with that. There was no point in building up layers and what have you, because I had the colour that I knew was almost identical to what I could see in the reference image. So I just put like not a super heavy application, but I put in a medium pressure application of that shadow. And actually, if you look at your reference image, sometimes when you're doing shadows, they don't always have like a definitive line. They kind of like fade out. But with a few of the shadows in this image, they have these kind of like definitive lines, and so I just put it in straight away. So now what I'm doing is I'm working on building up these layers, and with this particular project, this really was about taking my time, looking at the shapes that I could see on the grapes. Like the more darker colours, like the reddy browns that are on these grapes, laying down the shape that I could see, and then on the lighter areas, using like the lighter pinks, the lighter lilacs, and like pinky greys if you've got them. But it really was an exercise of very, very light layers for the most part. When it came to the shadows, it was a little bit different, but for the most part, the actual grapes was light layers building up, following the shapes that you can see. And trying to stick to that format the whole way through them. Now, the tip that I showed you there with regards to the Photoshop and stuff like that may not always work for you. It's just another option if you're struggling. If you take a reference image and you're struggling to pick out a color from your selection. So if you have like a group of pencils in front of you, and they're all the pencils that you have to work with, this type of technique might help you just select the right colors that are available to you. It just helps to visually, but it doesn't always work like that. So just use it and see how well this tip works for you. It may not work for you on every single project that you go to do. So, and also, like I said at the beginning here as well, I've supplied the outlining of these grapes, so you can go ahead and print that off if you want, and then trace it onto your paper that you want to use. That might just speed up the process for you and just get out of the way all the sketching, because the outline that I've provided here for you, it took me quite a while to get it, to sketch it all out, and all the erasing that I had to do and all the rest of it before I got it right. So it's a good idea to practice sketching to help you with your drawing abilities and that type of thing, but sometimes you just need to get the sketch done out of the way and then just concentrate on the colouring. So that's why sometimes, if I can, I will provide these these outline drawings for you just to speed up this process. So as you can see here with this grape here, you know, you will notice my hand starts and stops a lot, and that's me really concentrating and looking at the reference image. And again, building up light layers, looking at the image and just trying to put in the shapes that I can see. Now, another thing to bear in mind whenever it comes to the technique, the little tip there that I showed you about Photoshop and working from a reference image. I had this conversation with somebody the other day. Somebody put up on a comment up on Facebook that this lady had ordered a set of pencils. I can't remember which one it was. I think it was the Marco pastel pencils. And when she got them, they didn't look like the same colour that was on the photograph or the swatch that I had provided. It's very important that you understand that, especially when you're working on a computer monitor or an iPad or a Samsung tablet or anything like that, all these different screens and monitors that we use now are going to distort the colour of the images that we look at. It doesn't matter what it is. I have a laptop here, like a MacBook Pro, but I have an external monitor set up to the MacBook Pro. Now I can take my reference image, these grapes, and on the MacBook Pro, they'll look one way, and on the external monitor, because it's slightly older, they will look completely different. The colours change completely, and that is down to the different types of monitors that we use, the different type of screens that we use, and how those colours are portrayed, whether it's on a phone, a tablet, or a monitor, or a laptop. It doesn't matter. They're always going to be different. So it's important that you bear that in mind. And that's why I always say that when you are working from a tutorial, it's important that you select the colors that you can see, because the colors that you can see on your monitor or your iPad or your tablet are not going to be the same colors that I can see on my MacBook Pro or my iPad. There will be variations there. So if I were to put a list of colors up, say, if you were working from the tutorial and you're looking at the reference image on the screen that you're using, you might think to yourself, "My God, where's he coming up with these colors from?" That might be one of the reasons why you see colors slightly different. And obviously as well, then you've got, in the case of the pencils that I've just explained to you there, then of course you've got the case of one of the images was taken on a digital SLR, and the other image was the video image that I provided, and that was taken on a camcorder. So again, two separate entities there that are going to capture color completely differently. It's really difficult to do a review or to provide an image or anything like that, and in this digital age that we live in, to accurately and represent those colors so that everybody sees exactly the same colors, if you understand what I mean. Anyway, back to the tutorial. So you can see here again, I'm doing another part of this shadow, and when you get to these parts here, like the first shadow there that we put in, which was really quite bold, you're going to think, because I did, that it just doesn't look right. When I was getting to about this stage, I kept looking at that really kind of like deep red and thinking to myself, it just doesn't look right at the minute. And I kept looking at it and thinking to myself, should I erase it? Should I try and dab it out? Or should I try to do something different with it? Should I try to fan it out a little bit? And I kept telling myself, no, I need to be true to the reference image. That's what I see on the reference image, so I need to just do what I see on the reference image. And so it's important that when you're doing these tutorials and you're looking through and you're going through your process, you will get, I say this on all these tutorials, you will get to a stage where it just doesn't look right. I think it's really important that you try to push through that, and because very often is the case that when you get halfway through it, maybe 3/4 of the way through it, it'll just click and it'll start to come together, and you'll think to yourself, I'm so glad I didn't get rid of this drawing further in, or I'm so glad that I didn't change what was bothering me. Because once you start adding other colors and other tones and different, completing the drawing as it is, the more color you add to the drawing, the more like this shadow area begins to look right. Whereas at the minute, at this stage here, it just doesn't look right, and it's those urges that you need to try and fight. So as you can see here, I'm using this like lilac-y color, and again, this comes down to these like powdery, these powdery textures and tones that I see on these grapes all the time, that I want to try and capture. And I think if I was using something like the Faber-Castell Polychromos, or maybe the Holbein colored pencils, or Prismacolor, actually, Prismacolor have a fantastic range of really light lilac colors and like powdery grays in there as well. A lot of the colors that are in those sets, I think I probably would have been able to do an even better job of these grapes. The lilac that I was using there, I think, was maybe just a tad too dark, which is the reason why I always build up with the light layers, because then that way I can change things as and when I need. So again here, another shadow part, and for me, this may not be the process that works best for you, but for me, when I'm doing a drawing like this, putting these shadow parts in, they just help me to obviously define where the other grapes are. It's just it's kind of like a way of mapping the drawing out. If you're used to reading maps like I used to have to when I was a sniper in the army, you'd always look for reference points on the ground to correlate your map to, and it's I find that I do kind of like a similar thing here when I'm drawing. I try to find dark shadows or whatever it is, a reference point on the reference image that I can draw in and then work around that, and it helps me to keep my my scale right and stuff like that, and make sure that I'm not too far away from where I need to be. again here, you know, working with these light pinks. I mean, if these are red grapes, and I think from my perspective, a lot of the colors that I see in here, the predominant colors are kind of like these reddy browns, deep crimsons, kind of like on some of the grapes, like a really burnt orange, even. But here you can see the way my hand is here. You know, I used to hear other artists say this, and it wasn't until I got further into drawing and stuff like that, and trying to really improve my drawing skills, that I fully understood what these other artists were saying, and that is that making sure that you have a good reference image to work from is so important. But also making sure that when you're drawing, that your reference image is in a really good position, so that when you are looking at your reference image, you're not having to lift your eye away from the actual drawing too much. Obviously, you're going to have to move your eye away from it to see the reference image, but you're not going to be having to kind of like completely turn your head to look at it. You just want to be glancing up at the reference image, whether it's, like I say, an iPad or whether it's a phone that you're looking at, where you can pinch and zoom in to the image. But you will see me start and stop a lot here on this drawing, and it's just purely down to the fact that I'm concentrating so much on looking at the different shapes that I can see on the grapes, the highlighted areas, that type of thing. And because I really wanted to get this drawing right, because the drawing grapes has eluded me for such a long time. I've always got them wrong, and they've always turned out terrible. So this section here that we're doing now is again, it's another shadow, but this time the shadow is on the surface, the white surface that the grapes are set on. So the shadows are different. They're not as bold, they're not as dark as some of the other shadows that the grapes themselves are casting on the other grapes. So you can see here that what I can see on the reference image is kind of like a lilac grey tone. So I've got this colour, but then I'll come back in again and darken it down a little bit, because it needs to be a little bit darker than just this lilac grey. So I've just done a pretty rough layer there. I'm not being too delicate or anything like that, because I know that I'm going to come back in with another colour here to create this shadow. I'm just filling in the dark part. You can just see there in between these grapes there is a small darker part. So this is like an ultramarine blue here that have come in on top of this this lilac colour, and you can see there that it's getting closer to the colour that's on the reference image, well, that I can see in any case, but it's still a little bit away. Coming back in here with this darker lilac now, just trying to blend all those colours together and trying to match the colour that I can see. another great tip that I always advise whenever you're doing things like this, whenever you're doing a drawing, is that study your reference image before you sit down to actually do the drawing, and look at different parts of the drawing, and study it. And if there's any parts of the drawing that you think you are going to have difficulty with, whether it's getting the right colors, or whether it's, you know, drawing the right shape out, or whatever the problem might be that you think you're going to encounter, practice that on a scrap piece of paper. Practice it until you get it right, so that when you come to do your actual drawing, you're not going to be experimenting on the actual drawing. It might be a little bit more time consuming, but it's going to save you a lot of frustration in the long run. So with this grape here, if you look at the reference image, you can see that the way the light is on this, that there's kind of like a white ring. It's obviously where the light is just reflecting off the surface, but you can see that the bottom grape that's touching the surface has this kind of like white ring around it. So I started putting in this shadow as well, just to help me map out where that white ring is going to be. Sometimes when you're I think it's called negative painting or something like that, but you can see here on this particular shadow part, it has this lilac-y colour that we've already worked on, but there's also some of the red from the grape reflecting onto the shadow. So obviously, because this grape is practically touching the surface, so it's reflecting a bit of its colour. So you can see here that that's why I'm adding this like burnt orange colour. Incidentally, the shadow that looks really purpley at the minute, I do come back to this, and I think I add like a light grey over the top of it, just to tone it down a little bit, because it was bugging the life out of me because it was too purple, and I knew that I needed to tone that colour down. So I do come back to it later on. As with all of the tutorials that I'm putting up now, I'm doing them in parts. Now this one here is in 3 parts, each part 1 hour long. So it's a 3-hour tutorial. But I think this is definitely a better method of, rather than just doing like a full 3-hour tutorial and putting it up. This was something that was recommended to me by one of you guys here on Patreon, and I think it's probably worked out for the best. I think it makes it easier just to do these tutorials in bite sizes. So the again, still working on the shadow bits here. This particular part here of the shadow is a little bit like the first shadow that we did. It's really, really dark, but it's got a lot of red in it and what have you. Obviously, tones that are being pulled through from the actual grapes. And see, this goes back to the point that I was making earlier on, where the more colour you start adding to your work, the more you'll go back and you'll look at areas of the drawing that you first started and you'll think to yourself, right, okay, I need to add a little bit more colour there, because the more colour that you start adding to the rest of the drawing, the other parts might start to look a little bit washed out. So with this grape here that we're working on, there's a lot of these like powdery tones, these grey powdery tones here on this particular grape. So I'm just mapping those out first. And for me, I can see a distinct shape of this particular colour. So I'm just mapping that out, and then I'll come back in again with the pinkier colours or the orange colour, and fill in the blanks where I've left. You can see there that's the shape that I can see. And so now I'm coming back in here with this kind of like burnt orange, and filling in the rest of the grape. And that just, for me, it just kind of like it gets me to see the bigger picture, and I can work on it from there. again, just at this bottom part here, it's a little bit darker than the rest of the grape, because obviously we're, you know, it's there's another grape overlapping it, and all of these shadows you see that we're putting in, they may be a little bit tedious to do, and to make sure that you get the shapes of these shadows right and what have you. But it's these shadows that are going to give once you finish the drawing, it's the shadows that's going to give the illusion that it's like a 3D object, that it looks like a real bunch of grapes sat on a page, so to speak. This comes back to when I'm always going on about values, making sure that your darks are really nice and dark where they're supposed to be, and that your lights are nice and bright. It's that contrast between dark and light that's going to give you the punch that you see in other bits of artwork. It's important that we understand where we're coming from here as well, because when I do these drawings, I'm trying to be not hyper realistic, but I'm trying to make it look real. But that's just my style of art. That's just like what I like to try and accomplish and to try and achieve. But that's not to say that that's the right style of art, that's the right way to do these grapes. I've seen lots of other people do more like contemporary type style, just blotting in shapes and what have you, and the exact same reference image can look absolutely beautiful and amazing in so many different styles of art. So it's important that we understand each other whenever I do a tutorial. That just because I'm showing you this way, please don't think that this is the only way that you can do a drawing. This is just a way that I like to do it, and it's something I enjoy trying to accomplish. But by no means is this the right way to do these grapes. There are so many different variations, so many different ways for you to do these grapes if you wanted to. I just don't want people to think that this is the only way to do these grapes, or that I think this is the only way to do the grapes. It's absolutely not. It's one of the reasons I love art so much. We as people are all individual, and we're all different in our own way. We're all unique in our own way, and sometimes too many of us, especially the younger generation, and I know this because I've watched my youngest daughter Amelia do this. We try to fit into other people's ways, to how other people want us to be, and because that's not us, it doesn't come across right. And that's when young people become filled with anxiety and lots of other issues, and their lives become really miserable. And it doesn't just happen with young people. I know as well that it happens with adults in the workplace also. But it's one of the things I love about art, because I do think that despite all of the horrible nastiness that is going on in the world today, I do think that more and more people are able to live their life the way they want to now, and without too much ridicule. I know that's not always the case. I know, unfortunately, ridicule is still very much part of some people's lives, which is absolutely disgusting that they have to go through that. But I think this is one of the reasons I love art so much. There's so many different ways that this bunch of grapes can be painted, drawn by so many different mediums in so many different ways, and the exact same reference image can turn out beautiful a million different ways. So with this grape, there's a really prominent shadow. It's a very distinctive looking shadow, and so again, I've blocked in that shadow, but this time I didn't really go all in. I've got to come back in and darken that up. But you can see here now, so the grapes are really now starting to come together, and it's starting to look like part of a bunch of grapes. But it will get to another stage. I get about another halfway through, and it just doesn't look right again. So it's important that if you're new to colour pencil art, if you're new to art in general, it's important that you understand that every artist has these bits, and it may not just be like one particular point in the drawing. It might be a couple of different stages in the drawing where you feel it's not working or it's not coming together. But as I always say, you know, when you get to those parts, just keep pushing through, just keep working through. Because if you're at the point where you feel you really want to bin it, you don't really have, depending on the size of the drawing. If it's obviously a huge, massive drawing and you're using a lot of materials, then that's your call. But if you don't have an awful lot left to do, if the drawing's not huge and you know you're not going to be eating into loads of pencils and what have you, you have nothing to lose by following through on the drawing and continuing on with the drawing. So with this part here, with this particular grape here, there's a lot of highlights on this. There's a lot of contrast between this dark shadow, and then there's a highlight right on the edge of the shadow. And you can see here, I'm just dabbing in. It looks like I'm just dabbing in the darker areas of the grape. Trying to make sure that I define that highlight as well. now I've just moved on up to the green bits, like the stems. And there was no real particular reason why I did this, other than the greens that were in this set I really wanted to use, and I chose a botanical piece to draw because of the greens. But as you can see in this, there's hardly any green in this drawing, so it was a bit of an odd selection for a reference image, considering I was really eager to use the greens. But hey ho, the drawing turned out well in any case. But I just wanted to, I just jumped to this part of the drawing because I just wanted to put the greens in. I wanted to get a little bit of contrast in. I felt like I'd been working on these grapes for forever, and so it was just like a change. And in doing this, I completely contradicted everything I said at the very beginning, which was for if you're right-handed, working from left to right and what have you. But it's just important that you make sure that you don't rub the palm of your hand over any of your work. Like when I go back over to the left-hand side of this drawing, I just need to make sure that I'm careful and I put paper down underneath where my palm is. So we're coming up now to the end of this first hour lesson, and I think in this first hour we've covered quite a bit. You can see here, like I say, with the stems, I'm using kind of like these grass greens, olive greens, these yellow greens, which are kind of like my favorite type of greens. But when we come back in the second part of this tutorial, we'll finish off the greens a little bit. We'll continue on with the stem a little bit, and then we will start finishing off the grapes. I know this tutorial might look a little bit daunting because of the colours that are in it, the shapes that are in it and what have you, but as I always say to everybody, listen, if I can do this, absolutely anybody can do this type of art and get the same results I can. I know people get frustrated with me when I say I'm not an artist, and I don't mean that I don't think my drawings are good. That's not what I mean when I say I'm not an artist. It's kind of like when somebody says, when I'm in the kitchen and I'm making a meal or something like that, I'm not a chef. I'm just somebody in there who's making a meal. And I guess that's kind of like the best way I can represent what I mean when I say I'm not an artist. I'm not saying that my artwork is terrible, because I know it's vastly improved to the point where I'm relatively happy with an awful lot of the artwork that I do. And I can see that I've improved significantly over certainly the last 2 years. But I still don't refer to myself as an artist, because I think I think for me to say that I'm an artist is, I don't know, it seems to detract from those who went to university and studied art, and for those that have been artists maybe 20, 30 years. For me to just jump into this because I wanted to help my mental health, and after 5 years now, 5 or 6 years of drawing, just label myself an artist. I don't know if it's fair. Maybe a better term for me is an illustrator, because I copy what I see, and I think that's maybe what illustrators do. But again, illustrators have got to go to university or college or what have you to refine their skills and to get their diplomas and to get that title. So when I say I'm not an artist, or I don't feel like I'm an artist, I'm not looking for people to go, "Oh, Harry, you're amazing, you're brilliant, your artwork's fantastic." That's not what I'm looking for at all. I'm just trying to help you understand what I mean by I don't see myself as an artist. It's not so much about the actual work that I'm producing. It's more about the what everybody interprets an artist to be. Somebody stood there with a palette doing paints and stuff like that. It's just, if I seen a civilian walking down the street wearing combats, I wouldn't automatically say he's a soldier, because he hasn't done anything to present himself as a soldier. Just because he's wearing combats doesn't mean he's a soldier. It's kind of that type of thing is what I'm referring to. Anyway, coming up to the very end now of this last hour, so I will see you in the next section, and we can talk some more about some tips and what have you. But I hope that tip that I gave you at the beginning helps you out a little bit with the Photoshop, putting the reference image in Photoshop and using the eyedropper tool to select the colours that you might be struggling with, to get a pencil or a marker or whatever it is, paints that you might be using. So I'll see you in just a little bit in part 2.